air raid sirens. Many fear that Russian forces are planning to overthrow the government of Vladimir Zelensky. He went on national TV urging Western leaders to help protect his country. More than 100 people, including civilians, have been killed by the incursion that began yesterday by Russian forces. Some Ukrainians are huddled into subway stations for protection. President Biden and world leaders hold a virtual meeting today to map out the next steps.
The president says Putin chose war and will now feed.
Dr. Browning is on the line.
Okay, let me speak with Reverend Dr. Browning.
He's targeting Russia's.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm so glad to have you on. I'm really going to abbreviate my headlines to get them to you, and then you'll be done by 7:15.
All right.
But I'm so glad you're with us today.
I'm honored. I'm always honored. And you'll be asking questions primarily?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you, how do you keep peace in this time of turbulence? I mean, this morning I was, I'm up at 2. I'm watching the news, Pastor, and it's so clear that they are expanding this.
Classified information.
I mean, they were asking, you had one of the presidents of one of the border state countries who said, this is a world war. I said, whoa, I didn't sign up for that. And then he, it's like, whoa, we don't even know what the contours of this conflict are, right? So, so there was that. And then, the whole talk of, taking us back to the Second World War. I get it. It's just, it's very unsettling.
This is,
particularly for people who have children who are of the age they go to war. We already have troops over in Poland, and they are really a ride away from. We need the American troops to come in from Poland and bring us. In fact, it was an American, one of the men from one of the generals from the Pentagon. He said, we need to just take artillery over into Poland. I'm from Poland into Ukraine. I said, oh, wait a minute. And and then you're hearing the president say, well, there will be no American troops there. I'm like, whenever you have a war, troops are always on the table. That's what they do. So, and we've gone from, now we are in a war, and you feel it, you see it on television, and with all that we have got going on, it can be unsettling.
Travel times are hot.
Most definitely.
And that's just the war. Not to mention the fact that, what did you say? You went to the store, and it's like, wait a minute, your jacket was marked up 6 times. It's like,
outbound, there's crash at 390.
I mean, you're paying so much for groceries. It's like the hits just keep on coming. So it's a lot of anxiety, So if we can just find a way to find peace, and and I am mindful of the fact that a lot of people who listen to the show are agnostic or atheist, and they're Jewish, they're Buddhist. A lot of people are coming at God or away from God from a whole lot of places. But all people need peace, And I just try to be sensitive to that. I really try to be sensitive to that. And I'm always so glad to have someone who has some wisdom under their belt. Hello. Because, being the pastor of a church with thousands of people, you got to deal with a lot of folks. I understood when Reverend Evans, when he retired. But we all still went to his house, and he was still open. You come in to see him, but it was like, being a pastor, that's a hard life. And I'd love for you to come and talk about that. I know it's rewarding, but people don't know just how challenging it all is. But I'm so glad that you are here today. It always makes me feel good. And how is Pastor Browning? You know, my favorite woman pastor in the world.
She is doing good. She's had three eye surgery, so she's in discomfort all the time. Spiritually, she's doing well and still leading not only the women of the church, but I really think I know she has a ministry. And she's starting the women's season, so this is her time of the year. So she's doing good.
Oh, I've got to reach out to her to have her on to talk about that.
Because facts matter.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to. I will tell her, please, I'm going to reach out to her. But everybody, stand by. We're coming up.
All right.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Jackson Show. It's Friday, February 25th, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 here in Chicago. We used to be Air America, but today we're WCPT and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, Samantha and Linda and Andre and Dave and Philip. And Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, Philip from beautiful central Pennsylvania, Abraham from Venezuela, Paula from Chicago, and Daryl from Columbus, Ohio. Shirley, so many of you. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to have Malcolm Nance with us at the bottom of the hour. He got in from Ukraine. I didn't want to say because he had, I didn't know if he had confided that to me or not. But when I was in communication with him, which I have been, he said, I'm in the Ukraine. I said, let me just pray for him to get home safely. And he did yesterday, thank God. He'll be with us at the bottom of the hour to tell us what he's seen and to give us his perspective on this. We're going to talk with Kevin Gray, former president of the South Carolina ACLU, who is a veteran. I want to get his perspective too. And John Nichols will be talking about inflation. It really is corporate price fixing. Yes, and I think it's important for you to know that. You need to know the artifice in inflation as we're paying more and more money. And as you're hearing the anchors on the news say, well, people are just continuing to buy. Well, you got to buy the milk. What? You got to buy gas. What? So, everybody, I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278. 773-763. WCPT, and of course we'll have Doctors Deborah Holden and Shanina Knighton to talk to us about the latest on COVID-19, and one of my favorite pastors in the world, Reverend Dr. Granger Browning, will be giving us some good news today, how we can keep peace in these tumultuous times. Let's get some of these headlines out the way and get right to it, everybody. In Chicago, it's still snowing just a little bit, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful powdery snow. 29 degrees will be our high. We'll get a little bit more snow today, but not much. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 17 degrees above zero, mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 92 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 436 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 63 points. In the NBA last night, we had a lot of activity and a lot of, it was a mixed bag. Not really. The Timberwolves won 119-114 over the Grizzlies, and the Bulls were triumphant over the Hawks, 112-108. And the Devils will be playing here in Chicago tonight, and the Maple Leafs were they won over the Wild yesterday, 3-1. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is progressing as missiles struck the capital city of Kiev. This morning, Ukrainian officials said troops blew up a bridge about 30 miles north of this city to stop the advance of Russian forces who have already seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. We'll be talking with Malcolm Nance about why that is significant and where we go from here. President Joe Biden apparently has reached a decision on his first nominee to the Supreme Court, and a formal announcement could come as soon as today. Will it be Katanji Brown Jackson? Will it be Leandra Kruger? Will it be J. Michelle Childs? We will see perhaps today. It's an historic selection. It would be the first Black woman to serve on the nation's highest court. 3 former Minneapolis police officers were found guilty yesterday of violating George Floyd's civil rights. Jurors concluded the men showed deliberate indifference to Floyd's medical records as former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes as people stood by and asked him to stop. It killed him right there in front of everybody. So everybody, those are some of the headlines. Let's get right to it. I want you to call me, text me at 773-763-9278. I want to bring to you someone I've brought to you before. Indeed, he is a personal favorite of mine. He's one of my spiritual fathers. Every time I need to have a good word of prayer, I call upon Reverend Dr. Granger Browning. And he's got a magnificent church just outside of Washington, D.C., the iconic Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal, AME. I'm used to saying that. African Methodist Episcopal Church, indeed. He's like a family pastor. When my grandmothers passed away, he has helped us send them on to heaven. And we always call upon him and his beautiful wife. They co-pastor this church of thousands of people, and yet everyone has a personal relationship with this pastor. Let me get right to it. We are living in a time of unprecedented challenge, it seems, certainly in modern times. Inflation is through the roof. People are dealing with a pandemic, and yet we're being told we've got to get back to work, we got to get back outside, and people are anxious about that. In fact, the CDC is going to lift more of their mask guidelines today. Things are loosening up even while we're in the midst of this pandemic. And now, in addition to not having money and all of these things, we find ourselves increasingly drawn into a war in Ukraine. Of course, we pray for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia and the people of Europe and people all over the world, because there are wars going on all over the place. But this is one that's got our attention in a particular way. How do you maintain peace when so much is going on inside of our homes and on our television sets, just outside of our homes? How does one do that, Pastor Browning?
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for the honor and privilege of being on your radio broadcast today. And I thank God for how you have continued the legacy and taken on the mantle of both your father and your mother. And you have done it through media and informing and empowering all of us. So just say congratulations to you, and what an honor it is to be on the program. I really, almost like yourself, Santita, I have used your father as a phenomenal source of inspiration and motivation. These times are turbulent, but we have to also remember when your father emerged in the 60s, 70s, those were turbulent times as well, not just for the African American community, but we have to remember that Dr. King got the Nobel Peace Prize. We see him as a civil rights leader, but at the end of his life, he was marching against the war in Vietnam. So to answer your question, whatever religious background you have, most have a cardinal principle, and that is doing to others as you would have them do unto you. And so it really becomes a case by which prayerfully all persons of all religions and faiths, and even if you do not, it's still treating your fellow human being as you want to be treated. And there's an old song that in the 60s are always saying is give peace a chance. And so with that, it begins internally, that you have to come up with a way in your life where you are able to have a peace place within. And for me, it's Jesus. For others, it might be Buddha. For others, it might be Muhammad. For others, it might have been your own meditational life. But it is important in the midst of this turmoil that you have an inner peace. And especially, as you were suggesting, we are moving from a pandemic now to a war. And we have had terrorist attacks. But this is the first time, especially when Putin said yesterday, the consequences of any action from the West would be devastating. This is really a challenging time for many people. And so for me, also, Jesus comes in. He talks about that he brought light into a place where they had been sitting in darkness. And all of us can bring the light to a dark place. Your father went and got Goodman out of Syria. No one thought it could be done. It was not just bringing him out, but it was also allowing him to speak to what America thought was an arch enemy. And he spoke to them. And it's amazing what can happen if you cool down the rhetoric and then you start to try and interact with people in a more humane kind of way. I was with your father, one of his peace missions, and one of the women on the trip was speaking to the president of the country. Initially, the conversation was all about diplomatic this and that. And then she just brought up the fact that she did not want her grandchildren to live in the same oppressive way that she had. And then the president talked about how he did not want his grandchildren. And it wasn't a diplomatic, it got personal. My grandchildren, your grandchildren. And sometimes we have to realize whatever side, whatever political position, the mothers of the Ukrainian soldiers and the mothers of the Russian soldiers, whoever died, they have a common pain. And sometimes you have to meet people where their common pain is. And with that, it's important, as we've learned through your father, the importance of protesting. The Vietnam War did not stop simply because the leaders got together and decided. It was protest after protest. And so the inner peace then translates to how can I bring that which I have internally to a larger perspective. And community, as Dr. King said, is not just the neighborhood you live in, but the world you exist in, and seeing that you can bring light in the midst of a dark situation. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I'm going to let it shine. And the interesting thing, in 1933, that song was first sung in Huntsville, Texas State Prison. That song was written to bring light into a prison. We can bring light in a world in which there's a lot of darkness right now. But if we bring our light together, I'm sure the lights together will far outnumber and overpower the darkness that we appear to be in.
Pastor Granger Browning, Reverend Dr. Granger Browning, how can we join your service? Because now we can join you from wherever we are. You're in Fort Washington, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., the Ebenezer AME Church. How can we join your service?
EbenezerAME.org, EbenezerAME.org, and we'll be glad to have you watch us virtually. We're going to be starting in live worship services again on March 13th, but EbenezerAME.org.
I got to have you back before you do that. And of course, give my love to Pastor Joanne with you and your beautiful family. He and his wife helm that church, and it's thousands of people, but it feels like a little church. That's what I love about it.
Thank you. Thank you for the phenomenal work. What you're doing, especially right now, is so impactful. So thank you for the ministry that I'm going to call it that you have, and continuing the legacy of your father and family. So we thank the Lord for you.
I thank the Lord for you. Thank you for lifting me and everyone here this morning. Everyone's talking about the peace today. And there's something that we can do. In fact, Reverend Jackson is trying to go to Russia, bless his heart, because he wants to. He said, if we can just talk to each other, that really does make a difference, everybody. Reverend Dr. Granger Browning, Ebenezer AME Church, Fort Washington, Maryland, everybody. They'll be celebrating in person in about a month, mid-March. And so we're going to have you back here before you do that, so you can remind us and give us another word. Thank you for blessing us this morning, Pastor Browning.
Thank you. It's my honor. Thank you. And have everyone have a blessed and impactful day.
Love you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Love you as well. God bless you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Deborah Verholden and Dr. Shanina Knighton. Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist from Michigan State University's School of Medicine. She is their Associate Dean of Public Health. And Dr. Shanina Knighton from Case Western Reserve University, infection preventionist, registered nurse. I hope that word blessed you in the midst of all this tumult in which we find ourselves. We're going to be moving a little quickly this morning, and I thank you for indulging us. But a lot of people have wanted to hear from you, but they also want to hear from Malcolm Nance, who is an intelligence operative and someone who has been, really one of the This is really one of the great soldiers in our armed forces. He's just getting back from Ukraine as of yesterday, so he's going to talk to us about that. But Dr. Verholden, the CDC is supposed to announce today a significant, as they put it, easing of pandemic mask guidelines. Now, this is on top of this, goodness, me, and I'm pulling all these stories that I sent you driving you crazy in the middle of the night from CNN.com that COVID-19 is still killing more people now than it did during most of the pandemic. What do you say about the easing of these guidelines, and where should we go from here before, we bring in Dr. Knighton to help us to figure out how we're going to do this? Dr. Verholden. I'm weary, girl.
Yeah, we know a lot of this stuff is political, right? It's not public health. It's not, necessarily driven by the data or trends or anything like that.
No, but why do you say that? Why do you say it's political and not driven by public health?
Well, because, you think about it. We had a lot of places easing mask restrictions in the face of rates were going up. When things are getting bad or things are getting worse, it's not the time to, peel back restrictions and peel back protections. We saw that when we sort of rushed to reopen. And, simply put, and I know I keep saying it, people are just over COVID. COVID isn't over us, but people are over COVID. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, we're going to have to figure out what life living with COVID is going to look like. And I guess, they're saying we're going to do that now. I still maintain, I think it's unfortunate that we missed the opportunity to do some things better in general in our society and to better integrate a lot of the things that we learned in COVID. There are a lot of positive things. Like, for example, I know in my county, we funded a lot of work like this. People have made almost touchless bathrooms now. You go into a bathroom and you put your hand under the water, you don't have to turn anything. You put your hand under the soap, you don't have to turn anything. They got foot pedals on the door, so you don't have to touch the door, to open and close it. There's a lot that we did during COVID, and I think we could have done more. I'm really sad that we missed the chance to, improve the physical environment of schools. We spent a lot of money, and we continue to spend a lot of money during this pandemic. And so I just hope that we will kind of make those types of investments and continue to try to push those types of things forward. And for individuals, I'm going to just keep on reiterating it. I just encourage the people to really take the reins of their own health. Just take the reins of their own health. I've said it a lot during COVID. Move your arms and legs every day. It's the best, highest nutrient-dense diet that you can afford, and practice good sleep hygiene. If people would just take those three things on, make sure they have a primary health care provider, and then be just mindful around their mental health, that would be transformative. Because, yes, the train is leaving the station. It's taking off, moving a little slow, but it's taking off. And I think, like I said, I think I said this yesterday, I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will see no restrictions anywhere.
Well, with our infection preventionist, what do you want us to do? It might sound like it's just repetition, but I don't think so. I think that we need to be instructed every single day about how we need to conduct ourselves, because more and more we're not going to hear about COVID anymore, Dr. Knighton and Dr. Verholden. And that is what has me concerned with, as they're lifting these mask restrictions. How do we proceed, Dr. Knighton?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So for one, I would still be making sure that you still have your own guidelines in your own house, meaning when it comes down to screening, right, making sure you don't have people that are now just saying, oh, well, it's just a cold, or, oh, my nose is just running, coming into your space. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is, too, and Dr. Deb has mentioned this, we continue to mention this, and that's the fact that the public was never really truly educated on infection prevention. The fact that you still, and I'm talking about like in a mask, where you still have people wearing masks incorrectly or handling them incorrectly, wearing them, more than one day and not understanding the consequences, wearing them beneath their chin, right? Mm-hmm. So it was effective when people were wearing them correctly, but my concern is us reverting back because we haven't had proper education. Should we need them again in the fall because of rate of COVID going back up because we're on the gamma beta strain at that point, because we all know that as things continue to get lowered and things continue to evolve, then we'll just continue to exhaust the Greek alphabet, if anything. And so my concern and what I would prep people to do is just to make sure that they are making an active interest in learning how to prevent infection, making sure that they're learning they're conscious about hand hygiene. So when they're washing their hands, making sure that they're washing them for 20 to 25 seconds and that they're getting in between where the thumb meets the hand. So that's important. It's making sure that when your children are not doing a really quick sprinkle under the water and coming into the kitchen, right, after coming back from out of school. It's making sure, too, when it comes down to being in crowded places where the air is thick, and I haven't really discussed this, but it's like, are you even practicing facial hygiene? Mm-hmm. So if I'm coming from, let's say, a club or somewhere thick where I know the air is thick, people talk, and there's no ventilation, am I at least cleaning my face when I make it home from potential droplets that may fall on my face? So I just think that there's a lot of things for us to consider, and it's not to think about this from a situation of paranoia, but from a situation of empowerment, meaning now that I know better, how do I do better? How do I make sure that I'm prepared? And that's the thing. Unfortunately, I'm concerned that people are we're going to have more deaths, we're going to have more hospitalizations, but we're going to end up with a system that doesn't care because they'll consider it to be endemic, even though we don't know what the expected deaths are. So we know that if we're at 900,000 deaths, right, is that now the new litmus paper of how many we're expecting each year for over 2 years? So I think we have a lot to consider here, and I'm just concerned that the preventative practices is still going to fall by the wayside. People are going to stop getting tested, and we'll just be in the dark about it until it already has the long-term consequences.
1 minute.
So I encourage people to keep it on their radar. I encourage people that, in the scientific community to continue to keep it on their radar. I hope that there are, let's say that the scientists and the public health and implementation scientists, like Dr. Deb, that is continuing to emphasize, still get a primary care provider. Hey, if you're working, you don't feel comfortable, make sure you wear a mask. If you can't take paid time off, because we know that this happens, right? Some people don't have leave saved up.
30.
Making sure that these individuals are going to make sure that they're aware that they can make others sick, and that is the time to say, oh, I feel like I'm coming down with a cold. Let me put a mask on.
Everybody think about this, because now, as you've said, the train is leaving. Well, it has left the station. Now they're taking COVID off of the table, even though people are still getting infected with it. They're still transmitting it, and they're still getting sick from it, and they're still dying from it. So everybody, please pay attention. Of course, they'll be back on Monday on the Santita Jackson Show coming up. Let's talk with Malcolm Nance. Let's hear what his experience in Ukraine has been and where we're going to go from here, because it seems that the war is escalating. It is not de-escalating. It is escalating. What are we going to do? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes.
And there is no doubt.
Oh, thank you, ladies, for being so understanding today. This has like shifted everybody's priorities.
Yeah.
This has just been a lot. I think we're gonna,
Yeah, I'm sure.
because I'm wondering how they do that. because you have these troops in these close quarters, and this has been a global pandemic, and we've got our troops in Poland. I mean, how do they do this? I mean, how are they going to get boosters to people? I mean, how do you test? Are they going to do that anymore? What if someone gets sick in the field? I mean, it's just. I mean, of course, of course, you, Dr. Deb, and you, Dr. Shanina, would think those things through in a way that I would not. But there it is. But I've got Malcolm Nance here, and I'm so glad that you are back from Ukraine. God bless you. I was very concerned when I got that text from you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Santita. But, you really didn't have to worry about me.
I did. That didn't make me feel great. I'm not gonna lie. It's the trauma of having grown up with so many assassination attempts and whatnot. When I saw Ukraine, I said, he's where? Oh, yeah, I called my father immediately. And he said, let us pray for Malcolm. He said, well, he said, let's pray. Before he said he's going to be okay. He said, but let's pray. I said, okay.
Well, your prayers are answered because I got out on one of the last planes out of the country before the airports were struck. So,
okay.
So that power of prayer. Well,
it's a mighty, mighty thing. I want you to say hello to these young ladies. They are two brilliant doctors here. Dr. Deborah Verholden comes out of Johns Hopkins University, got her PhD at 24 on a full scholarship. Brilliant young Black woman. And she is the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's medical school. But she's also at Johns Hopkins, brilliant. And Dr. Shanina Knighton, she's an infection preventionist, a registered nurse, a research scholar at Case Western Reserve University. They're both brilliant, and they're on with me every morning, just going over health issues. And this is the brilliant Malcolm Nance. And I'm so glad that he's with us today, safe and sound, back from Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, I'm very happy to be around anyone who's a doctor. Because I'm just an old spy. But a medical doctor takes real education, work, dedication, and perseverance, whereas I just help get information from people. So for African Americans who are in medicine, I'm just in awe of you.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, I just want to say you're not just anything in terms of just getting information, because it's vital information that we
1 minute.
So I'm equally enamored, and it's nice to meet you.
We're so honored that you're with us. And everybody's been calling for you all week. I said, I didn't tell them that you were in Ukraine because I didn't know if you had told me that in confidence, of course, on a mobile phone, whatever. But, I didn't want to, say something. I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah. Well, the situation there, let's get to it, because I think your listening needs to understand something.
30.
Because, when I got back.
Well, no, stand by. We're coming up in 15. Stand by. I want you to go right to it.
All right.
Ten seconds.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
More and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. You've been calling for him all week. We have him fresh off the plane from Ukraine, Malcolm Nance. He said he's just an old spy. Betty said, that's the understatement of the year. And indeed, he's a prolific author and naval veteran, and he's an intelligence veteran. And so he can give us what he can tell us about what he has seen in the Ukraine. We're so excited to have him here. Of course, his latest book is They Want to Kill Americans. He's talking about President Trump on January 6th, and we're going to have him back to talk about that. But first, we need to talk about this. We need to understand what we're looking at, and we do not know. We do know that, 30 years ago, there was an agreement, that Russia said, look, I'll leave you alone with the reunification of Germany and NATO, and just leave us alone. Do not have an eastward creep in from NATO. That didn't happen, and we just had tensions that we have been dealing with for years and years and years and years. Oh, I would long for the days of Gorbachev. But here we are today, and we're wondering just where we are. And so glad that, number one, I'm glad that you're safe and sound and back here in the United States. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here. We're just glad that you're home. So thank God for that, because it seems that everything is escalating over there. And I'm just glad that you're not there. I'm glad that you're home. I'm sorry. We're praying for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia. More than 1,000 people were arrested yesterday, protesting for peace in Russia. No one wants war, but somebody does. So tell me, what did you see? What is going on? What's going on? I'm going to sit back because I want to hear from you.
Well, let me tell you and put this all into perspective, especially for our community, the African-American community. When I flew in last night to Newark Airport, I was in an elevator with some airport workers, some sisters who were airport workers. And they said, where are you coming from? And I said, Ukraine. And they said, well, we don't understand that. What's going on there? Why do we care? Essentially, why do they care? Mm-hmm. And I said, it's as simple as this, okay? When the Cold War ended, it was because the ideology of keeping nations as slave states was finished. That's essentially what these countries were. They were slave states behind the Iron Curtain. And democracy, allowing people to choose what they wanted to do democratically through elections, whatever kind of government that they had, that those decisions would be made through democratic processes. We understand that because we put this opposing ideology to communism up by invading Europe in 1945 and freeing, Germany from a dictatorship. And the Russians, the Soviet Union back then, created a wall of an ideological wall between freedom and slavery. And that wall was called the Iron Curtain. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, that wall collapsed with it. And all of those countries over there realized that they wanted to be free and democratic. And it wasn't NATO, which is a defense alliance, creeping to the east. It was those countries realized their only way to never become slave states of the Soviet Union again was to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and gain that defense. And that's how NATO went from 18 nations to 30, because those countries all realized Russia as an imperialist power was dangerous. Now, Ukraine had its referendum in 1991. They voted 98% to become their own independent nation and a democratic nation oriented towards Eastern Europe. Since that time, they've had 6 presidents. They have democratic elections. And they recently elected a guy by the name of Zelensky, who is Jewish heritage, a former comedian, if you can believe it. And he, opposes what's happening now, is that Vladimir Putin, an ex-KGB officer, has decided the collapse of the Soviet Union was wrong, which is crazy talk, all right? I mean, it was a failed ideology. Only Putin is not a communist. He was a hardcore communist when he was in the KGB, but now he's an oligarch. He is insane with money, and that is all Russia is. It's essentially a trailer park that's owned by a billionaire landlord with atomic bombs. It's a poor country. We have more trade with Chile. Believe it or not, like Micronesia has almost an equivalent gross domestic product. That country is big, but it's poor, and it only has gas, weapons, and oil. And Vladimir Putin and his rich oligarchy that now rule as a dictatorship have decided that the country of Ukraine should cease to exist. Now, I just spent a month in Ukraine, when you go to the capital, Kyiv, you normally think, oh, I'm going to Eastern Europe, and it's going to be third world, brutalist, concrete buildings, right? No, the place is literally like, I couldn't tell whether I was in Stuttgart, Munich, Lyon, France. It's a Western European capital. And let me tell you something, Santita. I've seen more Teslas in Kiev, Ukraine, than I saw in Hollywood. And that's saying something. So, they are a relatively well-off, solid middle class. But going out into the countryside, these people aren't dirt poor. They are comfortably low income. It's a clean country. It's cleaner than Ireland, if you can believe that. Because in Ireland, they dump their trash everywhere, down every crevice. And, it's just an amazing place. My first thought was, how is this not a tourist paradise? It's dirt cheap also. The people are very nice, 42 million people. But the city of Kiev is as big as Chicago. It has a population of 4.5 million people, and they are all fiercely, nationalistically Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's decided all of this must come to an end. He's going to overthrow the government, kill whoever gets in his way. They've assembled lists of people to be arrested and executed, or arrested and sent to concentration camps. That's come out recently. And he's decided to do it by force. 77% of the Russian army is surrounding and now invading Ukraine. But Ukraine has an army, and they are fighting. And that is what you are seeing today. You are witnessing a battle between a nation that wants to belong in democracy and the West and a dictator from the East. No in between.
What is the economic significance of Ukraine? Because it is a mineral-rich country. I mean, these are mineral-rich nation states, and we don't know much about them at all. And in fact, when I've had to do a deep dive, I've had to go to papers from India and from that part of the world. I cannot get that kind of information here. What is their economic significance?
Well, the economic significance to the United States is inconsequential. Yes, they have mineral resources, mainly coal, in the eastern part of the country. And as a matter of fact, the place where Russia invaded in 2014 in Donetsk and Luhansk was the major coal-producing part of the world. So Russia did that yes, there were people who were ethnic Russian, who spoke Russian in those areas. But that's like saying the United States would invade Vancouver or British Columbia in Canada because they speak English.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Well, but they're known for having the second biggest known gas reserves in Europe. And so I'm wondering, is this a fight over politics, or is this a fight over resources? Only because I ask that because, I'm asking you that because with China, for example, they have a quarter of our debt. They're communist. The British, they're socialist. They're our best friends. Ideologically, we kind of slide all over the map. And I'm trying to find out, why are we there? Because it seems to me that we have to follow the money to find out what's going on. Or am I incorrect?
You're completely off on this. This is you. First off, the natural gas holdings that are in Ukraine are nothing compared to those in Russia that are coming to Europe. And Ukraine's actual value to Moscow was that they had a pipeline coming from Russia that crossed Ukraine to go to Poland. So it wasn't as big as Nord Stream 1 or 2, but it existed. So if anything, Russia needs Ukraine to create a vassal state so that they can continue their sales. But what's going on here is absolutely, we are rolling back now to 1946. Ukraine wants to be a democracy. And what Vladimir Putin is more terrified than anything, it isn't about NATO. Look at the talk that he's saying about the Ukrainian government. Calling them Nazis? It's run by a Jew. There are no Nazis in Ukraine.
No, but they do have a Nazi presence. But don't they have a Nazi presence? Because just let me get it out, because because I've seen this in the New York Times. I've seen the pictures of the Azov group, and with their swastikas, the armbands that they've been wearing, because that has been something that the UN dealt with last year.
I went and another African American journalist, Terrell Starr, who you need to speak to because he's still in Kyiv. They investigated the Azov group, And the Azov Battalion, or the Azov Brigade, is a unit with well over 1,000 people. Not 1,000, I think it might even be as many as 10,000. It's very large. But within them, there are individuals who believe in National Socialist ideologies. And some of these idiots wear those armbands. They're not swastika armbands, but they're the Sonnenrad, right? Mm-hmm. Which is that multiple arm symbol of one of the Nazi leaders had. We have just as many percentage-wise in the U.S. Armed Forces mm-hmm. who are right-wing extremists and Nazi sympathizers. Okay? So you can't, the Ukrainian army is 250,000 men and women. Okay? And because there may be a few hundred in the Azov organization, you can't discount the other 249,000 people who are fighting for their country. They are not a Nazi nation. They are literally run by a Jewish Democrat, mm-hmm. all right, who is socially liberal and progressive. The whole country. I went through every major city in that country, minus going to Luhansk, right? I went to the Donetsk battlefront. That country is solidly leaning towards European socialist democracy. Right?
I don't think
the way Germany is.
Well, let me because I want some clarification, because I don't think that people were accusing the nation of being Nazi, but of having people who were Nazis who are in the military, and that has been unsettling to people. And so
we have that problem right now.
And look at January 6th. You've just written a book about it, right? I mean, this is what we're dealing with in the United States.
The point is the New York Times and these other groups. I'm going to tell you something about journalists in chief. Those people were bored for the last month. And this is what I got. I don't have any stories to write about. Well, we had to turn them on to the fact that there is a larger Afro-Ukrainian community in that city, right? Tens of thousands of people who are mixed race or who emigrated from Africa who are Ukrainian. There was a member of parliament who is half Ukrainian, half Nigerian, I want to say, who was an Olympic gold medal wrestler, who was a member of parliament. These people focus on ridiculous things. And the Azov Brigade, yes, they had some people who espoused to be neo-Nazis in it. But we in the United States, right now, we've got open Nazis who are visiting the White House under Donald Trump. We have people who are openly white supremacists. We had a white supremacist president who was telling the police to essentially hurt and kill African Americans. So the equivalency is ridiculous. What you have is a country that is solidly Western, solidly European American leaning. You have an enormous Ukrainian American presence in this country. And what they didn't want was to become what's happening now. Vladimir Putin has decided, and he said it in his own words, there is no such country as Ukraine, and it needs to be eliminated. And what's happening here is he's going to turn that country into a slave state. And for African Americans, we should sort of understand that. This isn't, rhetoric. The man is saying it himself, that he is going to crush their government. He is going to eliminate their armed forces, and he is going to bring them back as a province of Russia. Why should we care? My father fought in World War II. My grandfather fought in World War I. My great-great-grandfather fought in the Indian Wars. My great-great-great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. We should understand something about being put down and fighting for your own liberty. And this is why we had World War II, which was to settle this issue that we shouldn't have dictators going around the world and subjugating people. And in fact, we're sort of at a Casablanca moment, right? Where it's time to stand up and figure out where we fall. Because we have people on Fox News, like Tucker Carlson, literally, openly supporting this dictator. And if you're African American, that should offend you, all right? Because we paid for this in our own blood, supporting our armed forces in all the wars we fought to forward liberty and democracy.
Well, there's no question about that. But I see that with African Americans, there would be the question of why we didn't intervene in South Africa, why we still have Puerto Rico as a vassal state, why we still have the United States Virgin Islands as a vassal state. I mean, we've got some things that we need to clean up in our
I'm
own
all for statehood
backyard.
for those guys.
Yeah, but I'm just
All
saying.
for statehood for those.
You're right, but we need to
You know,
have that. We need to have those discussions. Why is Haiti still under the boot of the French? Why are these African nation states still under the boots of these European powers? And I'm hoping that this discussion will open all of that up, because when you go to France right now, their former colonized people want to get off the franc, and now you still have the Puerto Rican community here who say, either make us a 51st state or give us our independence and give us reparations for what you've taken from us. That having been said, where is this going? Because I heard one of your colleagues from the Pentagon who said, look, we have soldiers in Poland. What they need to do.
I got to call him back.
Okay, going to call him back. But I want you all to call me at 773-763-9278. Because we're so blessed to have him with us. I'm so glad that he is safe and sound. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to open up these conversations about how we deal with each other in the world, about who is a slave state, who is free, and where we intervene, where we decide not to intervene. So call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want you to call me or text me. I want to hear your thoughts about all of this. I'm going to continue this conversation with Kevin Gray on the other side of the break because of his other commitments. Do we have him back, Paul?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, let me bring up Mark. Mark, I know you have a question for Malcolm Nance, but you can ask the question now and we'll hold you on until he comes back.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking my call, Santita.
Thank you, Mark.
It's great discussion so far. I was just curious, what he thought of just Putin's just that mental state. I've never really gotten a real good idea of what like U.S. intelligence agencies and people who study the mental state of these different leaders. But this guy, from what I understand, Putin, has really been in isolation for months. He doesn't really have a wife. I think he's divorced. So this guy has just been holed up in a bunker.
Well, we don't know his personal life. Now that we don't know. We don't. And I'm sure
from
he is.
What I've read.
Yeah, but I'm sure he's not alone.
He's divorced.
No, he's a man.
Yeah.
I'll do
but
that.
I'm just wondering if I'd be curious as to what he thinks of this man's mental state, current mental state, and without being critical or just really just a factual assessment from an intelligence analyst standpoint.
Sure, I think I think you can be. I don't think that that's it's a bad question, but I think that we should ask those questions of the people we elect here, too.
Well, absolutely,
because we don't do that. You have a lot of elected officials who are on meds. Okay, so that's not a new issue. You have a lot of elected officials locally, statewide, and federally who are egomaniacal. You have a lot of folks with a lot of problems who have a lot of power, and that's part of the problem that we see today all over the place. Do we have Mr. Nance back? It's just going to voicemail.
Just got him, yeah.
Oh, but you know what? That's okay.
That.
But I think that's something for us to think about. It's something for us to think about. If I can't get him back today, everybody, I'm going to get him back next week.
I'm back.
We have him back. Oh, okay, gotcha. We were asking, but Mark has a question for you. Mark, you ask your question.
Great. Yes, I was just curious about, just from an intelligence standpoint, what is the current this assessment of Putin's mental state? I wonder what that might be. You might have some insight.
That is an excellent question, and this is why when Santita brought up these issues in other parts of the world, like Central Africa, Francophonia, which I know very well. I speak French. And Haiti and Puerto Rico. Those are issues of national aspiration. And those people do vote. They have their own impact. What's going on with Vladimir Putin is straight up dictatorship. No, I'm not joking. I mean, I've written 3 books about the Trump-Russia scandal. And the last one, the plot to betray America, I went to Putin's office in Dresden, Germany, and sat there where he was a junior KGB officer and met with researchers and found out this guy loved being a spy. He loved manipulating people. And all of this has risen up that everything that he does is fundamentally grounded in his KGB days. He doesn't speak to people. He keeps them to himself. He's very isolated. I met people in Kiev and spoke to people who knew Vladimir Putin very well, including an academic from Finland who Putin calls regularly to get his assessment of the West. And they say that he is in an altered mental state, that he is not the Vladimir Putin from 10 years ago. He has become a straight-up dictator, sort of a megalomaniac. And right now, this invasion of Ukraine, he made a statement yesterday about the sanctions, that if his oligarchs do business with America or the West from now on, don't worry about the sanctions punishing you. I will punish you. He said that last night. And what he meant was, you will take a long walk out of a short window. He kills his enemies. We are in, who knows what's going on with him. But this is not Peter the Great stuff, right? He's not building a city like Petersburg. When I was in Kyiv, we had this discussion with a scholar who knew him, another person who knew Vladimir Putin when he was prime minister under Boris Yeltsin. And he said, no statue will ever be built of Vladimir Putin. There will never be a Putanisburg, right? What is his goal? In his mind, he thinks he's a great leader. And I mean, you want to find out, I mean, if you want to, I think the only way to best understand him is to go watch the Three Stooges movie, right? About Hitler, where they play Hitler, Mussolini, and Goebbels. Because I don't think Vladimir Putin is of the right mind. Wow. I know. Wow, right?
Well, I think that's important.
Bomb.
I think that's important to analyze, but I think that there are a lot of unstable world and state and local leaders here. And I guess I'm looking for...
but they don't.
Well,
they don't control 6,000 atomic bombs.
I'm hoping that we will begin...
Perspective.
My perspective for me is, I'm an anti-imperialist. Okay.
And
so my thing is, what I want us to do is to begin to play the game and judge the game by one set of rules. Certainly what the invasion of Ukraine is something that is reprehensible. No one should be invaded, and no one should have their life and their lives upended. This is wrong. That having been said, I'm struggling with, just coming out of the Dr. King tradition, I'm struggling with the way we are characterizing people when we ignore our own shortcomings, because there was an agreement made with the Russians 30 years ago. There was. And we have gone against them. Now, do people have the right to vote on having a democracy? Of course, they should do that. But I'm wondering, but now we're on the verge of war. How do we, is there any way to negotiate our way out of this? Or are we going to have to fight our way through this?
Well, first, let me make a couple of points. If you're an anti-imperialist, you should be against imperialism.
I am.
This is rock solid, insane, World War II level. I mean, the guy has actually said he is trying to restore the borders of imperial Russia. This is not, I know we have a lot of people on the left who like to make these equivalencies. Look,
30.
Invasion of Iraq, rock solidly against it. I knew that it was just nothing but George Bush and Dick Cheney wanting to change the parameters of the Middle East. I worked in the Middle East my entire career. I knew we would get what we got. Afghanistan, we should have been out of there the year after
15.
That we invaded Afghanistan.
10.
One of these grand ideas. But this is an order of magnitude different. This is trying to re-engineer the poles of the world. And right now, those poles are the United States and Europe in alliance for democracy, right? Now, and Putin helped put Donald Trump into power.
Oh, yeah.
Right, with the intent to create an autocracy in America. And we're almost there. We lose this election in November, we're going to be under another autocratic government, autocratic rule. And this is where the big change is. And it will affect the lives of every person listening.
Would you come back and talk about this?
Anytime.
You
I'm
know,
on now.
I'm so glad that you came in from Ukraine and put me on your radar. And I have a lot of people who want to weigh in, but I know you've got other commitments this morning. And thank you so much. And thank God that you are safe and sound. Thank God you are safe and
All
sound.
right.
And
Well,
thank you for hearing me out. Because as I said, I am an anti-imperialist. I do not support what happened here. That having been said, I want us to play the game by one set of rules so that everybody all over the world can be free. That is what you've been fighting for generations. Love you much, Malcolm Nance. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. Sending you much love, Malcolm.
Oh, thanks. That was good discussion. Hey, you can call me anytime next week.
Oh, I am going to do that, but I'm going to connect you to Reverend today. Because when I told him that I had gotten in touch with you because he was concerned about you. Look, my father's older. Come on. He heard you when you were in Ukraine. He said, when is he getting home? I said, I do not know.
I need to give you Terrell Starr.
Please give him to me.
Terrell Starr is an African. Oh my God, you need to talk to this boy. Terrell Starr is an African American who has been living in Ukraine since 2009. He lived there 6 months out of the years. He's a Fulbright scholar. He speaks Ukrainian, Russian, and was in Georgia when Russia invaded Georgia as a Peace Corps volunteer. He knows that place up and down, and he's in Kiev right now wearing my body armor.
He needs your body armor?
Yes, he needs it because, he's staying there as a journalist. So I'm going to send you his contact information.
Please do that, because if I could get him on, is he planning to come home anytime soon?
No, and I'm really upset about that. I tried to get him out with me, but he's one of those hard ads. He lives there. He was trying to do tourism, and he knows all about the crazy Afro-Ukrainian community. I mean, it's not crazy. They've been there for centuries.
Yeah, look, I've spent a lot of time in Europe, so people don't understand that Europe has a heavy Black presence. Should I say it's not insubstantial? It's not.
Yep. Well, you know what? I'll get you his contact, and you can call him. He'll report from Kiev for you.
Is he moving around the country?
No, he's stuck in Kiev right now. He's reporting on the combat that's going on there. But I got him safe. I got him in a safe house, got him with armor, and I got an escape route for him.
Okay. Well, if anything happens between Twixt and now, before I get him, please let me know.
I will.
Because I'll try but I'll reach out to you because I'll see if you can do Reverend show on Sunday. But I want to connect you to Reverend today.
Yes.
Let me do that because he was
show on Sunday.
He was concerned about you. It's not that he didn't think you couldn't take care of yourself.
I know.
Because you can.
Yeah, it's a country to be concerned with.
Yeah.
All right.
God bless you. Thank you, Malcolm.
All right, Santita, you take care.
Sending you much love.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, how did you all like that? I know you did. So call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Want to hear what your thoughts are. So is it Silas and Flora and Joyce? So many of you, let me go back. Flora and Medi. And I was about to call my own name, Carmelita and Joan L. I did not want to debate first. What I want are some discussions. And what's very interesting is that people who are calling for peace are not able to get any, space. And someone like a Katrina Vanden Heuvel, who's been the editor-in-chief of The Nation magazine for the longest time, when you see her on television, she's been bullied. And that's something that is problematic for me. I want the game to be played by one set of rules. And if we're going to be anti-imperialist in Europe, we should be it in our own hemisphere. And we're not. We are not. Ask Puerto Rico. Ask the United States Virgin Islands. Ask the Philippines. Ask Panama. Ask South and Central America. We can keep on going down the list. And my thing is, if you want to fight for democracy overseas, fight for it here and establish it here. Fight for it in Africa. Establish it there. That's all I'm asking for. Don't call it a world war when it's the European conflict. We've got a lot of conflicts in Africa, and no one cares about them. We just want to get their resources so we can keep our cell phones working and our world moving smoothly. I want us to play the game by one set of rules. Let's make a judgment by one set of standards.
Mr. Gray's on the line.
Kevin Gray, how you doing?
I'm okay.
I can hear that.
I got to go meet I'm supposed to meet some guys that clean out a warehouse, so I'm just kind of.
Well, we just had Malcolm on, Malcolm Nance, your homeboy. He was great.
How was he?
He was great. He was great, and everybody was glad to hear him. Number one, he got in from Ukraine yesterday morning.
How is he?
He's great.
What's his take?
Well, his take is, this is, what you're hearing, that this is a very dangerous incursion, that Putin is a very dangerous man, and we need to put him down, and that Ukraine is, a very well-developed, very westernized country, and they want to be democratic. I guess my issue is, I think that when you start looking at the International Monetary Fund and all of that, and the fact is we did cut a deal with Russia when Gorbachev was the premier. We said...
What did he say to that?
Well, I mean...
How did he respond?
He said that was untrue, but that's established fact. It's established fact.
Well, that narrative.
Well, hold on. We're about to come up. We're about to come up. We're about to come up. I'm going to make it real quick so we can talk about that. Is Ron from Michigan still there?
Yes, he is.
Okay, just ask him to hold. Thank you so much.
Coming up in 10 seconds.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
More and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. If you want to hear what we just had, the conversation we just had with Malcolm Nance, the brilliant Malcolm Nance, the intelligence veteran, please go to WCPT820.com/Santita, WCPT820.com/Santita, and you can hear that in about an hour after the show. And so I want to hear your thoughts about his interview. I want to hear thoughts from Kevin Gray, former president of the ACLU of South Carolina, but he's been a progressive activist and organizer for more than 40 years. He's a veteran, an Army veteran. And so I want to hear his thoughts. And he's from a family, generations like Malcolm Nance, generations of veterans. I want to hear his thoughts. Everybody, call me at 773-763-9278 and keep us tuned in right here at WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And meet my morning stars on my official Facebook page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please like me there. And the Santita Jackson Show, my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show. In Chicago, we will have a high of 29 degrees, a little bit more snow today. Got a beautiful light dusting yesterday. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 17 degrees, mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 92 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 436 points. The S&P 500 closed up 63 points. In the NBA, the Timberwolves are triumphant over the Grizzlies, 119-114, and the Bulls are triumphant over Atlanta, 112-108. Tonight, the Devils will be meeting here in Chicago, and the Maple Leafs, well, they were triumphant over the Wild last night, 3-1. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is progressing as missiles struck the capital city of Kyiv this morning. Ukrainian officials say troops blew up a bridge about 30 miles north of Kyiv to stop the advance of Russian forces who have already seized control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Why is that important, everybody? Going to be talking about that in just a few minutes. President Biden might be announcing today his historic pick for the Supreme Court. Apparently, he has reached a decision on his first nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. According to people familiar with the selection, It will be historic. It will be the first Black woman nominated to serve on the nation's court. Will it be Katanji Brown Jackson? Will it be Leandra Kruger? Will it be J. Michelle Childs? Or will it be someone else? In the George Floyd tragedy, 3 more Minneapolis police officers were found guilty yesterday of violating George Floyd's civil rights. Jurors concluded that the 3 men showed deliberate indifference to Floyd's medical needs as former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes, May 25th, 2020. And no one wants to call their names, but I will. Minneapolis police officers Thomas Lane, Alexander Kung, and we need to know who they were. We need to know who they were. You need to say their names too, not just Derek Chauvin, and Officer Tao. To Tao, everybody. So let's get to, I want to talk to you about, just for about a minute, just about owning your own home. Did you know that it's possible, even if you don't have great credit, even if you have poor credit, if you've had financial problems, if you have burdensome debt on these credit cards? So many of us have to live on these credit cards now. You can make it. You can. There is a way for you to get a home, but you need to call Team Hochberg. Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. If you want to purchase a new home, if you want to refinance your existing home, if you want to build credit, if you want to try to keep your home, if you're securing a VA loan or a reverse mortgage, call Team Hochberg. Manny, 40 years of age, project manager. He had a nice income of $70,000 a year, and he called to get pre-qualified for a home, and he was carrying $20,000 of debt and on his credit cards and had no savings, no down payment for a home. But he called Team Hochberg for a free consultation, and they got him on track to become a client. And guess what? Their loan officer, Jose Rodriguez, created a plan for him to pay off his debt, save for a down payment so he could purchase a home. And he did it in short order, everybody. So if that is a situation that is likened to yours, call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, 56david.com, call 855-56-DAVID, and just get a free consultation. Find out what's going on. When you talk to them, they'll be able to help you. I promise you. Let's go on to Kevin Gray. Kevin Gray, you are a veteran. You are the former president of the South Carolina ACLU. Indeed, you managed Reverend Jackson's presidential campaigns in South Carolina in 84 and 88. Brilliant political organizer. And you're a veteran also. Give me your assessment of this conflict. You know, because I just spoke with Malcolm Nance, your fellow South Carolinian, and brilliant man that he is. And I guess the challenge for me is I am not an imperialist, right? And I want to see imperialism judged by the same yardstick. I mean, if we're going to be affronted by what happened in Ukraine, and of course you don't break someone's national boundaries and upend their lives as the Russian president has done in Ukraine. That is established. That having been said, come on, Puerto Rico, United States Virgin Islands, the occupation that we have of South Korea, and on and on and on. What do you make of what we're dealing with right now?
Well, it's really difficult to watch any of it and listen to the coverage of it from the American media. With them promoting the idea, although it's unstated, that there's such a thing as American exceptionalism, and America is free of the same of hypocrisy in all of it. Now that's what bothers me with it.
What do you mean by that?
Your dad used to say America used to use the term moral authority, and he used to give the example of your grandmother. When your grandmother told you to shut up, you shut up, not because she would hurt you, because she would love you, because she loved you. She had more authority. The United States has no more authority. Look at what we did in Iraq. Look at what our relationships with Iran. You want to talk about Puerto Rico or the Philippines or even California, New Mexico. I remind people that New Mexico is New Mexico for a reason, because the United States took it from Mexico. So, you know, I was talking. It's all very disconcerting because our country has no more authority in dealing with Russia either. You know, we're raised up watching Red Dawn. We're raised up, and I mentioned it on the show, your father's show on Sunday. Well, you know, when black folk think about Russia and what they think Russia is, well, these days they look at it through the eyes of a movie character, Robert McCall, played by Denzel Washington in The Equalizer. And when I came up in the Army, we were Ivan, and that was the term we used, because you want to always vilify your enemy by giving them a name. Ivan, the Russians, were our enemy. We trained to recognize silhouettes of Russian tanks and silhouettes of Russian airplanes. We trained for that war. We were never taught in school to any significant degree how many Russians died in World War II. The World War II, for the most part, even in contemporary culture, is viewed through the lens of the Holocaust, which was real. But, you know, most people forget the Russian losses during World War II. So, you know, as I said on the radio on Sunday, we have to talk about Russia in a normal way instead of now what you're hearing. Putin is a madman. He's deranged. He has messianic impulses. Unlike the United States as a country that has been the imperial country that went to Vietnam to take up a fight for the French when they were losing, and sent back countless people who were like my brother, who came back drug addicts and came back just broken because they fought a war they should have never fought. Now, no question, what Russia has done in the Ukraine, crossing that border and attacking a sovereign nation, is wrong. And there have to be steps. But it can't be just steps toward a new Cold War, and that's what we're hearing on mainstream media. This idea of, well, we got to stop Putin at any cost. Well, you know, you want to stop him, but you don't want it to be a nuclear war. That's for sure.
I mean, they've taken over Chernobyl. He's holding Chernobyl.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and so what there has to be. Russia has to have a way out of this. No question. I support the idea of sanctions, but what I don't support is the idea of shutting off the voices of those people who would want to see some different kind of way of coming at this that still lead with the idea of peace first, and you know, I talked to Jeffrey St. Clair at Counterpunch last night, and a couple of my colleagues writers that I used to write with. I posted on Facebook from Common Dreams. You know, I'd read a lot of articles that you and I shared back and forth on this crisis on Common Dreams, and I posted Norman Sullivan's piece, Bob Dylan, Masters of War and the Ukraine crises. Facebook banned me for 24 hours because they said that article violated community standards. That article started out with the Bob Dylan song, With God on Our Side, that starts out, I learned to hate the Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and to accept it all bravely with God on my side. They banned that from Facebook. They banned Bob Dylan from Facebook because he sang that many decades ago. And I'm listening to the folk on MSNBC talking about RT and it being a propaganda machine. So the mainstream media has gone to banning anybody that says anything about the history of this conflict and where it will lead. In the same way that they shut down people that were opposed to the Iraqi war when George Bush and Colin Powell were talking about weapons of mass destruction. You have to have a full conversation about war. You just can't have, he's the bad guy and we're the good guys. You can't have that conversation just like that, especially at this day and time, because the stakes are too high.
Let me go to Ron from Michigan. Ron, what's on your mind today?
Good, Santita. And your guest, I can't remember his name, please.
Oh, well, this is Kevin Gray. Before him, we had Malcolm
Kevin,
Nance.
Yes. Yeah, I know. To address Malcolm, my grandfather served in World War I. My father served 3 years in the Pacific. Uncle Johnny was in Europe, and Uncle Rob was in the Pacific. My brother was in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam. I saw the heroin epidemic you speak of start in Vietnam. Okay, I saw that, and that was perpetrated by the CIA, plain and simple. And that heroin epidemic spread to the United States. Now, Malcolm X said we kill people during the Vietnam War. But first of all, the Gulf of Tonkin got us into the Vietnam War, and that was a lie, a filthy lie, and we're still paying for that. Vietnam veterans are still not being compensated for their injuries, like me. Plain and simple. I don't want that. I want that benefit for my son who's in uniform now if he has to go to Europe and fight for Ukraine. But we kill people too. The Phoenix program in Vietnam, and I don't. And Malcolm said that we should have gotten out of Afghanistan. We never should. Jimmy Carter never should have put us in Afghanistan. It was a Russian involvement with a border, just like it is now. And, you know, the Russians paid for Afghanistan, and the world is still paying for what we got into in Afghanistan. Worldwide jihad, never ending. The 13 dead Americans, how soon we forget, huh? Even though Joe Biden did a great job getting us out, he's doing a good job of keeping us out of this one. But I'll tell you this. Anybody, Republican or Democrat, who's in favor of this war, you take your son or daughter right now, or your grandchild, and you march them down to the induction station right now, because there's a $60,000 bonus for U.S. soldiers to join up now, because our military is hurting for people, plain and simple. So if you want to talk war, put your blood on the line, put your skin in the game. And Santita, this station is the greatest, which allows us to speak freely, and not be called fifth columnists because we want peace. I could go on with this.
Ron, I hear you. But people have been called fifth columnists who've been calling for peace, and particularly at this time. Kevin, why don't you speak to that? Because you can hear, Ron's pain.
I hear his anger, and there's national media, the mainstream media, once again, and they wonder why there's a so-called right-wing populist movement against certain entities in this society. It's because they talk at you. They act as though you're not the ones, or your children are not the ones, or your grandchildren are not the ones that have to carry these missions out. They perpetuate this idea of thank you for your service, because it gets them off the hook. It's all so sad, and they block people from debating what we ought to debate before we enter into something. This idea that you're just going to shut people off. Somebody wrote on my Facebook page, well, you're just following behind Tucker Carlson. And I said, dude, I don't even watch Tucker Carlson. I can barely watch. I watch the rest of the news. I watch CNN, I watch MSNBC in bits, and every now and then I do watch Fox News. But this idea that because you support having a dialogue about what you're about to get into, then you become an ally of what's the term, of Ivan. It's just ridiculous, and I think we have to challenge it. As I said, Norman Solomon is a well-known writer, a well-known peace activist, and I said the idea that you're going to ban the words of Bob Dylan about war.
Well, he was a peace activist at 14. Well, he was a peace activist at 14, and then the FBI started trailing him at 14. At 14.
So that's the danger. That's the danger. I talked to a friend last night, and he said, "Well, I'm looking at the film on TV of Russia going into Ukraine, and all I can think of is shock and awe." I said, "Yeah, that was the war where we went in looking for weapons of mass destruction. Really, and where the soldiers that went into Iraq, many of which came back and joined the military. I mean, the police departments around the country, many of which are abusing people in the streets." And because we have a crisis in which the police are so militarized in this country, and they learn it overseas. They learn it in these wars. People need to get a grip.
So what do you think? I mean, indeed, everyone agrees. Well, everybody might not, but certainly we all agree that what Russia has done is wrong. I mean, Ukraine is a sovereign country, and they want to be that. That having been said, you still do have pockets in Ukraine who embrace being Russian. So there's that. Where do we go from here? Because we're seeing this escalate, Kevin. I mean, and
well, first of all, this idea of the expansion of NATO, and Ukraine now asking to join NATO, which, of course, if you're a member of NATO, you're sworn to defend another member of NATO. All these, that's I don't know if I would support Ukraine joining NATO, because that's been a contention with Russian presidents or Soviet presidents for decades. Mm-hmm. And the other issue is you're a sovereign country if you can defend yourself. So, I think right now, and this is just starting, and casualty numbers are low, way lower than it was when we went into Iraq, or when we attacked both times. I think there's still room for negotiations. I think that there need to be peace talks. The sanctions should, use sanctions to force Putin to the table, because he said this isn't over. This is just starting, and these sanctions, when we do put them on them, that may also include cyber warfare against us. And there has to be people talking to one another instead of vilifying one another. No question. There has to be consequences for Russia.
Well, because my question is, what is the way out? Because the way, if you look at corporate media, and if you listen to the people in charge, it's like there's no way out but war, and that for me is tragic, and it's not true. There's got to be a way out of this. There's got to be an acknowledgement, and I respectfully disagreed with Malcolm Nance, because it's established fact. We did establish with the Russians when Germany was about to reunify that we would not touch them. They said, okay, we're going to let Germany reunify. That's what the Russians said. Just don't bring NATO eastward, because we're very clear that it is an American organ of European states in Europe. And we immediately, broke the agreement. And your words got to mean something.
The standard is what happened when Cuba tried to install missiles in its territory.
Well, no, I want you to answer Silas. She said, this is not about NATO. Listen to the words coming out of Putin's own mouth. He wants domination, emphasis hers. I have 1 minute.
Well, as I said, you can't. I think NATO is the crucial piece in this. If Ukraine if the United States and other European nations push the issue of Ukraine being a NATO nation, then that's a problem for Russia. It's always been a problem for Russia.
15.
That ought to be on the table. The United States does not set up a military alliance with the country on the border.
10.
Russia, just like they wouldn't allow Russia to set up
5.
Weapons and missiles in a country that was really
90 miles away.
90 miles away.
Cuba.
And that ought to be on the table. But I think it does start with sanctions on Russia, and see what the economics will do for bringing them to the table. But But this idea that you're going to start moving United States troops over into that theater and further escalate it when when Russia's ally is China.
When China just said Russia has a point. Can you speak to that on the other side of the break real quick? I have John Nichols coming, but I want you to speak to that. I want you to give me a closing thought on the other side of the break. Back with more Santita Jackson Show. We're going to be talking about corporate fixing and inflation. Oh yeah, the corporations have something we're paying for. Back in just a minute. Yeah, I want to give you a chance to make your oh boy. But you know what, everybody, I'm so glad that you all are engaged today because they really wanted to hear from Malcolm and they trust his word, and I respect that. All I'm trying to give you all is more information. That is to say, a lot of people have a lot of perspectives about what America does. And you ought to have a perspective on it too, since we were enslaved here and we were brought here on an imperial project. That's my only point. And we've got troops over there.
On the line.
We have John Nichols?
Not yet, but I got Chaparral Wells.
Okay, we've got troops over there. I mean, and my question is, are you willing to go fight? Are you willing to send your loved one to fight? I just want to know that. I think we need to talk about that. So, Chaparral, how you doing?
I'm good, Santita.
Remember, let people know who Courtney Copeland is. Eric Easter from Howard University. Whoop, whoop. Sending you much love, my sweetie. Thank you so much. And you remember Eric Easter from the campaign?
And Eric and I communicated every now and then.
Mr. Nichols is on the line.
We love Eric. Oh, Eric, sending you much love.
I used to write for Eric's magazine, One Magazine.
Oh boy, love you, Eric. It's good seeing you today. We're Howardites together, everybody. So, but I want to get your closing thoughts. So there you go. Chaparral, you have any thoughts before we come back on?
I mean, I definitely agree with Kevin Gray on this stance. So much more to this, but I think that once again, it sounds like Iraq 2.0 for me. And I think that, we're entering this under false pretenses, and it's really about the oil. It's about the oil. They don't care about people. They don't care about lives. They don't care how many people are projected to be killed during this war. They're going to do whatever it is to protect the interest, which is the money and the oil, and enrich the oligarchs that are on both sides, the United States as well as also Russia and Ukraine.
Girl, can you believe they call these big businessmen who run Russia oligarchs? They call Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who's South African, they call them businessmen. They're oligarchs. Entrepreneurs, but they control everything here. I mean, what? Most Americans are poor. Functionally, you cannot afford to go to the emergency room. What are you talking about, Ukraine being a poor country when you go to the countryside? You go to the trailer park, you see the same thing here. Oh, no, you don't even have to go that far. Just sit in your own house.
On MSNBC today in Ukraine, comparing the apartment building and some areas of the Ukraine. He said that Ukraine was Putin's Chicago.
Yeah, it's the same, about the same size.
Coming back in 30.
Do we have John Nichols?
We do.
Okay, thank you.
I am here.
Hey, John, we've got Kevin Gray here. I'm going to let him get a closing statement here because we have been talking about. Thank you so much, Paul. We had Malcolm Nance on an hour ago. Yes, yeah, he just returned from Ukraine yesterday, so I'm really glad because when I got a text from him because I was reaching out to him, and he told me he was in Ukraine. I said, "Oh gosh, really?"
I saw Malcolm this morning.
5 seconds.
Oh, stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. I talk about inflation, but we'll still take your calls about Ukraine. That is, it is an issue for all of us. And of course, John Nichols from The Nation magazine has weighed in on that, but he's got a fantastic new book, Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers. I encourage you to get it. Before we get into all of that and get some closing thoughts from Kevin Gray, we've got our girl Chaparral here. Indeed, the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation, named after her son. They're doing great work in his memory, in his name. You're about to have a big gala, Chaparral.
Yes, Santita, we are. We're having our first annual charity ball for the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. And this foundation was started on behalf of my son, Courtney Copeland, who was killed March 4th, 2016. And we are actually continuing his legacy with this foundation because what Courtney was doing in life, he was helping single moms. He was helping the homeless. He was doing what he could for kids. Just one person doing what he could do. And so with his memory, we want to continue to keep it alive. And so that's why we established this foundation. The fundraiser will actually go, every dollar that we raise for this fundraiser goes back into the foundation. We don't take any personal salaries or anything like that. And so it basically goes to support our programs, which is our back to school program, our college scholarship program, as well as also our Christmas toy giveaway, our Feed the Homeless program. And that's why we're asking everyone to support this event. And you can get your tickets at eventbrite.com. And the key word is the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. And you can always give us a call at 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. I want to thank your audience, especially Nina, who purchased a ticket for a mother yesterday, and I appreciate all the support, Santita. Thank you so much.
Blessings to you. Blessings to you. Thank you, Chaparral. Kevin Gray, before we pivot over to John Nichols, as we talk about inflation, I always knew that there was something else going on with inflation. I said the only people who've made money during this pandemic have been the billionaires and the soon-to-be trillionaires. This bothered me, and now he's documented it. Oh my gosh, Kevin, what have we been hearing? And I hear you in a particular way because you are from a family of veterans. Your father, your brothers, you. You've had literal skin in the game, and we all do, really, whether we know it or not. But you're a veteran. You are a veteran. So so sending people to war is not something that's academic to you. I mean, it's happened in your family. It's happened with you.
Yeah, I had nephews. I had one nephew did 2 tours in Afghanistan, 2 tours in Iraq. I've had nephews and nieces on ships with these last wars. You ought to at least talk about and have a I hate to use this term, but robust discussion in the community about what you're about to get into before you get into it. And when you start talking about U.S. troop movements in Europe, and someone said, well, they only got 6,000 advisors. I said, oh, how many advisors they start out with in Vietnam? And the first thing that you do when you go to war is that you vilify the enemy and you make them be the other, and so that it makes killing them easy. And then you shut down any debate in your country about what you're about to get into, which I mentioned earlier in this show when I posted a Norman Solomon piece on Facebook that I got from Common Dreams. It was called Bob Dylan, Masters of War and the Ukrainian Crises. And Norman started out with a Bob Dylan recording of With God on Our Side. And so they basically banned Norman. They banned the words of Bob Dylan. And then it becomes, well, they try to alter history. Well, it wasn't really about NATO. If you go back and read Tom Friedman's piece in the New York Times earlier this week, he talks about Putin, Yeltsin, Gorbachev, and the history of not wanting a NATO nation, a militarized Western supported nation on Russia's border. And that's always been a bone of contention. But all of a sudden, you watch national media and they say, oh, no, that's not true. That's not true. Like it's not true that there are not neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. So if they create an alternative reality, now no question that the Russia's incursion into Ukraine has to be confronted. But the idea that you're going to go from 0 to 100, you're going to go from sanctions to talks of we got to do it by any means necessary with China supporting Russia, and the idea of a new Cold War is absolutely ridiculous. You know, the reason that the folk in New York or wherever they're sitting in their comfortable studios can say that is because they don't think that these bombs can come to this country. Everybody needs to sit down at the negotiation table. This idea we're just going to cut off the oligarchs and cut off the money. Well, rich people find a way to move their money someplace else. It could be here, it could be in Russia, it could be in wherever. But it first has to start with an honest conversation why we're in this predicament, and the fact that the United States cannot come off as though they're the moral arbiter of anything, because this country has no moral authority. It hadn't had moral authority since it went to World War II. Every other war it's gotten into, we're still there. We still got troops there trying to maintain an empire.
And we've lost. I mean, bottom line, we haven't won anything since the Second World War. We haven't.
Yep, and all it ends up with is a Pentagon budget that crowds out everything else.
Well,
we had a national health care system, then there wouldn't be so much skepticism about COVID.
Yeah.
We've got to look at things different.
Kevin Gray, you got to get his book, Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. Killing Trayvons. He's been gone 10 years. We just commemorated the 10th anniversary of his murder. 10 years. He would have been 27. He was killed at the tender age of 17. That's right. Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. Sending you much love, Kevin Gray. And of course, we're welcoming onto the show, your dear friend and my dear friend, our brother beloved, John Nichols from The Nation magazine. And we've been talking about Ukraine, and we're going to talk about the dirty secret of inflation. But if you want to make a comment about what we're seeing this morning as we're watching this conflict continue to amp up, John, feel free to do it either at the top or at the bottom or at the end of your remarks, or not at all. But you have a tremendous.
Sure.
Go on, John.
I'll tell you, they're not unrelated topics.
Okay.
Here's painful reality. I started the week writing about inflation, and we'll talk about that a little bit because there's a lot to be said on it. But the fact of the matter is that this Ukraine crisis is very likely to lead to all sorts of profiteering. And remember, when we say inflation, what it really very often is corporate profiteering. Mm-hmm. It's very likely to see all sorts of profiteering, particularly in the area of oil and gas prices. And so what we need to understand is that in a time of war, in which the U.S. is engaged, even if the U.S. is engaged not directly on the ground, but peripherally, there is a very real chance that prices go up. That's not unheard of, and that does happen. Supply chains get interrupted and things like that. But what we need to understand is that highly profitable oil and gas companies are already signaling that they're going to jack up prices, right? And, at a time when President Biden is saying in his press conference yesterday that, we're all going to have some sacrifice, we're all going to have to give some, the oil companies aren't saying that. What the oil companies are saying is, this is going to be a bonanza for us. And so just as we saw a profiteering during the pandemic, and we've seen it coming out of the pandemic, we are very likely to see this moment be another excuse for profiteering and another argument, in my mind, for the government, for our federal government, to crack down on these corporations that announce record profits and then jack up their prices.
Do you think that inflation, which started before the official the official start of this crisis in Ukraine, Russia, U.S., NATO, do you think that that there might be a little bit of a sleight of hand, you know, to put all of inflation on what's happening in Europe instead of really looking at what these corporations have done. I mean, they have, you said it is the dirty little secret. Corporations are jacking up prices and profits, and they started doing it they've been doing it all along, but during the pandemic, John. I mean, what would you give us the stats on how much Big Pharma is making off of these vaccines?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where it starts to get mind-blowing, and I read a lot about that in the book. Give you an example. First off, we should be clear. As with so many things that big business does, they don't rely on the market. Multinational corporations, particularly monopoly corporations, rely on the advantages they get from government in the form of research, in the form of a flexibility as regards regulations, a freedom to set prices as they choose, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in the case of the pharmaceutical companies, they benefited tremendously from government research, from shared information internationally, and they developed the vaccine. Good for them. Good for them that they developed the vaccines. But in the case of Pfizer, as an example, they opted out of restrictions on pricing. And so they rushed their vaccine to the market. They got contracts to sell, billions of doses, and they are profiting at exponential levels. Oxfam, the international aid group, says that Pfizer is making, pause here, $1 million an hour, every single hour, day and night, in profit off its vaccine. Another group that did
$1 million
an
hour.
Yes, $1 million an hour.
So that's $24 million
Pfizer
a day times 30. That's $720 million on average a month.
Yep.
Times 12.
And you know how much
that's
they make?
$8.4 billion. 8.64.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh
but
my
it actually
gosh.
goes well beyond that. But don't think you're done with your calculations, my friend. Pfizer just announced that they doubled their revenues last year. Now pause and think about that. So this is an established company. Imagine if you've been working at something for years, right? And suddenly you double your revenues in 1 year. That's jaw-dropping. And of that, $20 billion is coming from the vaccines, right? So in that doubling of their revenues, the vaccines are overwhelmingly central to it. And Pfizer predicts that they will have an even greater growth in their revenues and profits in 2022. So, I mean, you can't even begin to wrap your head around this. But let me give you another stat just to keep it going. International group that studied the profits and the revenues and that for these different companies determined that Pfizer, BioNTech is Pfizer's partner, and Moderna, during the heat of the pandemic, and continuing into now, have been making $1,000 a second, $65,000 a minute, $93 million a day, every day, weekends, weekdays, all of them, in profits off these vaccines. So, when you start to look at what the pharmaceutical industry
How much a day?
is pulling together.
How much a day?
93 million.
A day?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, and when you start to look at the revenues and the profits on this, obviously revenues are different than profits. Revenues are, what you all bring in. But the profits are just exponential here. And so here's what we need to understand and what we need to wrap our head around. These companies, they did something that an awful lot of people value. They got a vaccine to the market quickly. But they did so in cooperation with governments, with international groupings. This wasn't just something they did on their own. And yet when we have come to them, when, citizens and global groupings have come to them and said, hey, could you, share some of your technology, share some of your formulas so that in the most vulnerable places in the world where nurses and doctors do not have vaccines yet, if you can imagine that, where they haven't even begun to deal with this, the pharmaceutical company said, no, we won't. Now eventually Moderna eased up, but Pfizer continues to refuse and in fact fights against vaccine equity on a global scale. This is just it's
unbelievable.
jaw-dropping. And they refuse to engage in the shared sacrifice that they told nurses and doctors and bus drivers and food delivery workers and others to engage in.
That's it. What about, are there, I feel like we're living through another Gilded Age. Let me just go right there. John, there are no breaks. I mean, Fred, if FDR was a traitor to his class, he was highborn, if you will, in the United States, even though that's not supposed to happen here, it does. He was from a very wealthy family, he and Teddy Roosevelt, and they were both reformers because I guess they knew from the inside that, this is unfair. What did Elizabeth Warren say? Hey, the game is rigged against you. And the game is rigged. And I hear these, the anchors on television, they're saying, well, inflation is at an all-time high. We haven't seen it like this in 40 years, but people are still buying. I'm like, John, you still have to get gas. You still need milk. You still need food. You still need. And yet the prices continue to go up and there are no breaks. I mean, it's like, who is checking them? Who's checking these corporations, John?
Well, not many folks at this point. That's the problem. You're exactly right, Santita, when you run down this. And one of the things I did in the piece I recently wrote was to go through, not my statements, not my claims, go through the headlines. And
wait, it's too cute. You went from CNBC to Reuters to the New York Times to the Ticker to Yahoo Finance. I mean, I loved it. Now, let me, first of all, before you even get into that, why did you just grab the headlines like that?
Because they tell the story. You don't have to, again, I don't have to make a claim. Let's just point to the reality. And these companies operate with such impunity, they don't even worry about the image that they're creating. And so we had in all those headlines, major companies like Amazon and Kellogg's and others announcing record profits and then saying in the same statement that they were going to raise prices.
Wait. This is from the New York Times. Procter & Gamble's sales jump as consumers brush off rising prices. I don't know anyone who's brushing off these rising prices. Everybody I know is like, I didn't even buy meat at the store. I can't believe all the money I paid when I went to the grocery store.
And that's what was so wrong with that headline there, because people aren't brushing off the rising prices. They're mad about it, but they don't have the capacity to do much about it. They can't, they can maybe say, I'm not going to buy this, but at the end of the day, as you point out, they're going to need, milk for the kid and diapers and gasoline to get to work. And, you just run down the list of things that people need. There's a lot of stuff that we have to buy, but we're not happy about the prices we pay. We don't brush it off. And this is the weird part about it. As Elizabeth Warren says, many of these companies are effectively monopolies. They have overwhelming control of the sector of the economy that they're working in. And as a result, they look at the situation, they say, well, we can raise prices, so we will. Okay. And that happens, that's how capitalism works, right? But in a functional, sensible country, when you see companies, jacking up prices at exponential rates that really are causing harm, you can take action to address that. I mean, you can either regulate or tax in ways that make it harder for companies to do that. And also, most importantly, you can break up monopolies. It's interesting when you look at some of these big companies. Many of them are amalgams of what used to be 20 or 30 competing companies, right? All sorts of small companies that went on the market, and some charged lower prices because they wanted to get a stake. That's a market. That's where you actually have competition. But in so many areas, Santita, we don't have competition. What we have is monopoly, and what we see is companies literally announcing record profits and then jacking up their prices. And that's something that, frankly, our political leaders ought to be talking about as a front and center issue. This isn't something that they should just say bemoan and say, oh, it's really too bad that this is happening. They have a duty to stand on the side of the great mass of Americans and say, that when you have a situation where prices are going through the roof, it doesn't matter if people's wages go up a little bit if they're competing with prices that are going up a lot. And this is creating an unfair and difficult circumstance. It's especially hard for seniors and others who live on fixed incomes. And so this is a time when inflation ought to be treated as an emergency issue, and profiteering ought to be identified as a act of wrongdoing, even if it's possible in some states and in some ways as a crime.
It should be a felony. Because some things are public utilities. Your food is a public utility. You need gas to get around. I mean, this is just criminal. This is what happened with us with Wall Street and, quite frankly, the fleecing of Americans with our homes. We watched the economy collapse over the past 20 years. We have watched that, John.
Yep.
And people are struggling, and and these people are lifted up. I mean, when you look at the show Billions on Showtime, it's like, wow, does anyone not get that these people are manipulating our lives? And people cannot afford to go to the hospital, John. People cannot afford to go to college. They can't even afford to go to high school. They can't even afford to leave their own homes. This is shameful. What should be done going into 2022? I mean, is there anything? Should this be a campaign issue, do you think?
Should be a central campaign issue. It's going to be anyway, right, by the way. The Republicans will make it an issue. There's no question of that. But they won't even have to say anything. If the Democrats don't act on this, the Republicans will just say, hey, look at your circumstance. You decide whether you're better off now than you were before, right? And it's an old trick politically. And a lot of people are going to look at that inflation and say, wow, this just isn't working under Biden and the Democrats. Now, can the Democrats reverse that? Of course they can. But what they have to do is go after the corporations and go after the profiteering. That's what Franklin Roosevelt did back in the 30s. Mm-hmm. He didn't just say, oh, we want to ease your pain. He said, by the way, these are the people that are making it painful. He actually said of the bankers, I welcome their hatred. He was going to go after them so aggressively. And so for Biden and the Democrats, what they need to understand is if they don't start talking about inflation, if they don't start talking about profiteering, and if they don't start aggressively addressing it, then it is very likely the Republicans will take advantage of this issue. And as we've already seen in many suggestions, take control of the House and Senate and render Biden effectively a lame duck.
I mean, just because of anger, because now they're campaigning as populists. And Democrats are campaigning as corporatists. This is so crazy. I've got a minute and a half, and before we go, President Biden is going to nominate Katanji Brown Jackson to be the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. Wow. What? Yep. I mean, a former public defender, everybody. This is huge. Of course, we'll be talking about that on Monday.
Ooh. So let's talk about it for a second, and let's just celebrate the fact. Look, I give Joe Biden, who you and I have often criticized, we found things that we didn't agree with him on, but let's give Joe Biden full credit. He's got this Ukraine crisis. It's very demanding. He's got a lot of other demands on him. He didn't take his eye off the ball. He promised to appoint a Black woman to the Supreme Court, and it looks like today he will announce that.
That's right.
That is governing as you are supposed to govern, even in a time of crisis, even in a time of challenge, keeping your eye on the ball and on the things that you promised to do. I give the president great credit for that.
Absolutely. And let me tell you something. I'm going to give him credit and I'm going to give him criticism. That's what my mama does with me every single day. Yeah. Like, what's this? My father called me yesterday. I heard your show and you need to, and he doesn't do that often. But the thing is, critique. If you love someone, you critique them. And I'm going to do that.
But I'm going to say today, we've got we'll say plenty of things about Joe Biden that he should do better. But
he did this right.
It's very difficult. I'm sure there are people around him who said, well, let's put off this announcement because the Ukraine thing's such a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that. But obviously, it sounds like he has decided
30.
The United States. He made commitments. There's a timeline. He's sticking to it. He said he would choose a Black woman and he would do so quickly. If indeed he makes the announcement today, he's kept a promise.
You know what? And let me tell you the other dirty little secret. He's got to keep Black people in his column. And he's got to deliver to us. Yeah. And that's all there is to it. I will give you credit for coming through on your campaign promise, which is what you're supposed to do. This is politics, everybody. You've got to continue. I've got 10 seconds.
Remember what Molly Ivins said? Molly Ivins said, the dance with them that brung you.
Come on, don't you miss her? Love her.
I miss her, but I
Oh,
also
crazy Molly Ivins. Miss her. Love her. But her words live on, as do yours, everybody. Get Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers. It's a great book. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you on Sunday on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. There's so much to talk about. I love you, everybody. God bless. Oh, thank you so much, John. This is, I really want to do a deep dive on this. Please.
Yeah, inflation. Yeah, it's we definitely can, because to my mind, it's an endless issue. And Biden, we're giving a compliment at the end there. He really, in my opinion, he didn't do very well in his event yesterday, because he said to the oil companies, "Oh, I hope you won't raise prices." I mean, that's like saying to you, "I hope you give me $1 million," right? It's like
tax free.
But you got to be stronger than that. And so this issue is very likely going to come back and haunt us, because I think the oil companies are going to, there is going to be an interruption of oil, and I think the oil companies are going to come and jack those prices through the roof. We'll be looking at $4 or $5 gas, and so it's something to talk about.
Oh, there's a whole lot to talk about. Now, I really want you to talk about that, because the only people who made out in this pandemic were the big corporations, people who have a lot of money. These other folks, everybody else, you had to get on that bus, you had to get down to your job, you had to work without masks, you had to work without, you had to go, you had to get out. You even had people, you had supervisors placing bets on these largely Hispanic workers at these chicken factories who was going to get COVID. And this is when COVID was killing everybody. I mean, really?
This is at a level.
Oh,
Yeah,
that means it's mean, it's ugly. It's mean, it's ugly.
Those managers are just thugs.
Oh,
those are awful.
They are. But you know what's thuggish?
Facilitated by power.
Yeah,
Because
but this is
power-
thuggish too. This is thuggish too. To make people pay. I mean, folks don't have the money, John. And when I see these anchors on television gleefully saying, "Oh my goodness," but people are still buying. I'm like, you gotta eat. What are you talking about? You sound crazy.
Well, that's exactly right. Well, and the thing is, what so many of the elites, frankly, in this country lose sight of is that it's like that headline you read where people shrug off rising prices. People don't shrug off rising prices; they deal with it. Now, how do they deal with it? Well, full well. They see their rent, they see their gas, and that they know the things that they have to immediately do to get to work that day, to get home, to survive. And so then they start to look at things like their medications, and they say, "Well, maybe I won't take the pill every day. Maybe I'll take it every other day," right? And we hear this all the time, where there are people who sacrifice their lives, their health, everything, because of high prices. And so this is not something people shrug off. It's something they're forced to deal with, and it's painful.
People are dying. People are rationing their insulin. They're dying. People are rationing life-saving medication. Mm-hmm. They're dying. People can get the shot to curb hospitalization for COVID, but you can't afford to go to the hospital and get treated. People are dying. This is awful. It's awful.
And this is what we got to do.
Yeah.
And Santita, I've got to go.
I love you, and thank you so much. Oh, it's been. Oh my goodness, it's been a day. It's been a day, but thank you so much. And we're gonna do a deeper dive on this, and we also need to do another deep dive on your book.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Well, I'm just so glad to be on the band with Kevin. I got to go, but I love you a lot.
I love you too. Everybody, I love you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so glad I was able to get Malcolm Nance on. Love Malcolm Nance. Whether I agree with him or disagree with him, I have enormous respect for him. Enormous respect. And I'm so glad that the arms of protection of God were around him so that he could return safely yesterday. I have to tell you, I was just so happy to hear when he said, I just landed in New York City. I'm like, thank God, because I want him to be safe, want everybody to be safe. And I want us to study war no more. My father often says that we do best what we study most. We study war. Let's start studying peace. We can do that. We can do that. Think about this. Do you want to send your loved one, or would you go to Ukraine to fight? We already have some troops in Poland. They are a ride away from having to take ammunition. That's what one of the generals was calling for today, to take ammunition over to Ukraine. That puts them in the line of fire. If they get shot at, what are they supposed to do? Not shoot back? You think that's not what they've been trained to do? We have to think about that. And I maintain, because when I invite people onto this show, I am not trying to have a fight with them. I want them to have their say. I maintain that we've got to play the game by one set of rules. If we're going to be against imperialism in Europe, you need to be against it in this hemisphere, in Africa, and in Asia, and throughout the world. That's all I'm saying. If you're going to look at the psychological profile of one leader, look at all of them, because there are a lot of them who are not well. Let me put it that way. A lot of them. A lot of them are objectionable. A lot of them are just downright mean. But the media gives them cover because they make them look like they're nice. They're mean. And you see it in policies. And then you hear about it in history books when we're long gone. So I'm just saying, play the game by one set of rules, that's all. I'm not going to support an imperialist. But you know what? When our formerly colonized brothers and sisters from Africa, when they go to Europe, that's how they see the sitting prime ministers now. And the sitting royal families. They see them as imperialists. And I do too. And I want that ended. I want freedom for Ukraine, and I want freedom for Haiti. I want France to give them the money that they are due. Haiti had to pay France to be free. How wrong is that? So when you talk to me, I can't get more misty-eyed about Putin than I am about Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines and all these people who tried to free our brothers and sisters there, or Nat Turner, or Harriet Tubman. I'm sorry. I'm just saying, play the game by one set of rules. Just by one set of rules. I'm not going to get more upset about Europe than I am about Africa or about the United States. I still don't have my voting rights here. I want them. I deserve them. I need justice in policing. I need police reform. I need that. I'm not going to clean up your house before I clean up my own. Or as I'm cleaning up, as you ask me to help you, let me get my thing together and give me the money to make it happen. How about that? I get your emotion about what's happening in Europe. I get it. My grandfather came back from that Second World War with a broken heart. With a broken heart. He had to work for Nazis. He had to sit behind Nazis. He had to go onto a colored car. When that train left New York and got to Washington, that's what he had to do. So wait, ain't nobody said sorry to him yet, and he's been dead 40 years. So, let's get this thing right. Let's get it right. I am not going to be more upset about you. I am not going to be more invested in your stuff than I am in my own. Those are facts. That part. That's called being grown. I love you, everybody. Oh, John, there you go. But I mean it. I mean it. You know, Medi, you know what's going on in Puerto Rico. I mean, how are you going to talk about Ukraine and not talk about Puerto Rico? How you going to do that? How are you not going to talk about the United States Virgin Islands? How are you not going to talk about the Philippines? How are you not going to talk about North Korea? Huh? How are you not going to do that? How are you not going to talk about what we did in Grenada and Panama? How are you not going to do that? What if Russia decided to line up in Mexico and point some guns at us? We wouldn't tolerate it with Cuba. I'm just saying, play the game by one set of rules and have one set of have judgments that are based on those rules. So, I love you, everybody. I will see you on Sunday on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but I'm sure it'll be great. I love you, everybody. See ya. God bless. Thank you, Paul.